Hey Bales, welcome back to coding a 2D side-scrolling platformer in GameMaker Studio 1.3, if you want the version 2. Today we are going to look at this formidable thing called particles, which is graphic effects you can use in your games. And the cool thing about particles is instead of using objects for if you want an explosion of blood or something in a game, or rain or something, then instead of that you can have, instead of using a lot of objects which will take up a lot of memory and make your game very slow, you can use particles which will then make this effect, but doesn't need to have a lot of other stuff in it, they don't have any code in them other than they are presets when you create them. I'll come into that, how you create them. But first, if you use two particles from an older version of GameMaker, there used to be stuff like attractors and changers and deflectors and stuff like that. These are not functioning in GameMaker anymore. And the reason for this, because it seems sort of counterproductive to remove functions from GameMaker. But the reason this is not working anymore in GameMaker Studio, when it used to work in at least GameMaker 7, I think it was in GameMaker 8 too. But the reason is that when having these functions that would be able to, for example, destroy your particle at a given position and stuff like that, or make them change direction or whatever so they can bounce off the ground and stuff like that, the GameMaker had to keep track of every particle, and that took a lot of memory. So, and that's normally not something it would do in particles like this. So they removed that, so now they are a lot better to use for graphic effects as they were meant to, and doesn't take up too much memory. And I will just show this is the obsolete function, and as you can see in the help file, I just moved it in here. But that's what we're going to talk about. And as you can see, I have only created one new particle sprite. This is a white arrow pointing to the right, and that's just an example to how you can use sprites for particles. I will come into that. Before doing this, I actually want to talk about another thing, and that is window resizing. I've quickly showed how you can do that in the object global controller in window here. If we move these so we can have the code, what this will do is that depending on your window size, if you scale the window, then this will change the view, the port. And right here, there's another plot of it only changed the port and the height of the view. The rest will be changed in your game code for the views as we have already, and that will adapt there. So there's no need for any more code. And simply it just checks if either the horizontal or the vertical, the width and height of a port equals to the width and height of the window, and if this is not true, then it will set it to that and calculate the height compared to that, what it should be, making sure that either the whatever your resolution or proportion of the window is, if it's 4:3 or if it's 8:2 or whatever it should be, it will always only show horizontally that part of the map that it should show, and the rest will be cropped vertically, so that you do not have any it's not easier for you when it's another resolution. And also the views, you don't have to adapt the background images because they will always fit that criteria if you create them correctly. But this is the only code that you need. And then in the global game settings in Windows, you just go to graphics and say allow the player to resize the game window, or you could change it yourself during the game in settings or something, but this is just for an example. And then when we start off the game here, I can now resize the window, and this gives me opportunity to also show you the other stuff I have created in the particles as the rain over here. But as you can see, Okay, something went wrong, but that's because you need to have it on full scale, so it scales the window in it before it changes it. On my laptop it worked with both, but for some reason it only works with one of them full scale on my stationary computer here where I show the video. But now, as you will see in the example, if you pop up here, we got some come on, there. We got some particles over here, I will talk about in a moment. And then if we resize the window, it will adapt. So we can still see the same horizontally, but it will adapt vertically. And likewise, it will adapt inwards if we do this, so we cannot see a lot, but it will still keep the horizontal as much as it should be. So this is thanks to that small code I just showed you and the code the code in the game controller changing the view width and height and stuff like that. And even though the things is changed, you can still, the background still follows and everything as it should. So no problems here. Also, and I would like to do this with you because you should see it. And I do not know if it does a whole lot of difference, but I would assume that it will clean up some stuff. But if we say surface resize, and this is only in GameMaker 1.3 that you can do this, because in 1.3 you have the application surface, which is the surface that your screen is pretty much just drawn to. And with that we can resize that as well, so that we do not have any there's no reason to draw it bigger than the room. So export. But again, I show you this because if you want to, it will be in the released version I will post after this, and it will not make a much of difference visually here, but it should make your make it work better. Like for example, before, if you scroll back in the video, there was a black line out here because it didn't scale perfectly and stuff like that. It eliminated that. So it's something you can do if you want to, and you can go in full screen now, and this helps a lot. And as you can see, the normal ratio of the game I've created right now is 640 by 480, but this is not the same scale that or the same proportion that my screen has, so it will just widen everything. And as you can see now, the background also follows vertically, which you could not see last time because it was planned out to fill just as much. But to the main part of this video, the particles. If we start with the rain over here, this is a force field, a force object that I used. And what it does is it simply allows you to add particles to this field, as I will show in a moment. And as you can see, this one is one of those where it increases gravity a little, or adds to a vertical, so you push down while in it. And that's and then in the game, for example, have it rain there, so you can have a reason you're pushed down. You can see there's also a little fog in there. Not a lot, but just a little to give a nice effect. But there's also other particles. For example, here now you can see I have these green arrows following me while I have the speed boost, instead of that pretty ugly effect I had last time. And if we run over here, you can see now I changed my color here. That's not particles, that's just because I thought that was more fitting for the strengthen up effect. I will show you how I did this also, but it's pretty simple. I just changed the image blend, and then I faded back here after the effect wore off. And if we go take the jump effect, you can see I have arrows pointing up to show that I have a jump boost. So that's pretty cool. You can have effects following you around, or you can have them like this in an area where you have the force here, the force fields. If you want just the effects, you can create an object for that. I didn't. You can also just use a force object and then don't have it do any changes to your gravity. Instead, just or horizontal speed, and instead just have it as an effect. But let me show you how the things work. I have one new script here, and it simply adds 2 arguments to DS lists. I'll tell you why in a moment, but it's just the type of the particle and the amount of particles, and its name is simply have particles. You would like to call this in the creation code of your force here for every particle you want, and the first one is the layer furthest away, and then the more you add, you will stack closer to the screen, so you can choose how they should be layered. But here you can see I use P like fog and P rain, and you can clearly see there was not only one raindrop per step. There was a lot more, but that's because that it calculates the rain, the number of particles, how many raindrops or how many of the particle should be for every 32 times 32 part of this field. So the more we scale it, the more it will be, but it will have the same density all over the however you want to scale it. And that's just a cool way to make sure that if you, for example, have that all this rain, the boxes are different sizes, but you don't want to calculate how much rain you need instead, and then you can just say 1 for every 32 by 32 field. Adds up here to a lot because the field is larger, but the density is the same as if you put a lot of small forces next to each other. So that's that, and in the force object we have added an emitter, which we of course destroys afterwards and clears out the lists, the part type and part count you saw before, and as we already cleans out the onme list, of course, and we have the 2 lists we create, and they are empty as a standard, and so if you don't want any particles, it will still create the emitter, but that's just the thing I thought was easiest to do instead of adding an emitter creation. But then they are executed in the bottom here of in the small segment here. As you can see, it's a very small code here, and what it does is it simply takes if the list size of part type is bigger than 0, so if we have put anything and lift any particles, and if any part of the force object is inside the view, then it will do this. That's what the object if the object is inside of the view, and that's because there's no reason to draw the particles if they're drawn outside of the view. There's no reason to take up that space, and then we just go with a loop for the amount of different particles we need. So that can be 1, that can be 2, that could be 10, and then we burst them out of the emitter here first we set the region to be also only what's inside of our view, no reason to draw them outside. We use some calculation with some min and max depending on the boundary box of our object and our view position, and then we burst out the emitters we need and again it will calculate, and it's a little messy to look at, but it will calculate, oops, over here, exactly how many particles it should create to match our density we have chosen in our creation code. So that's pretty, it's actually not a very hard equation. This it's simply just some multiplying and some minusing at the right places, but it is alternatively you could remove all this checking if it's inside the view, and you can simply just draw all the particles in the whole area, and then you would just say times, instead of this you would say image X scale, and instead of this over here, the next part up to here, you would just say times image Y scale. So that depends. You can do that if you would rather have it simple instead of making sure to draw as little as possible. The thing about particles is you can have a lot of particles, but if you have too many particles, it will still slow down your game, of course. So still you want to use them sparsely. The particle system itself is created in the global controller and the create event here. We have all the part system, simply part system create, with a depth of -100, and then we have all the particles. And of course, if you want to, sorry, I was about to burp there. You can have multiple particle systems, you can have different layers and stuff like that. I keep it simple, I have one and it's drawn up on top of everything right now. And then I have the different particle types. And the way you create the types is with the part type functions. First you say part type create, and then you can set all the settings for that type. For example, here we have it fades between having no alpha, being totally transparent, then go up to being half opaque, and then going back to be totally transparent again. This is the rain. The color is white of the rain. The shape is a line, and the size of this line is 0.15 X scale and 0.15 Y scale, and that's simple just because it's some of the basic shapes, and then you can resize it. It got gravity, it got a direction, it got speed, and it got orientation, what the line is facing, what direction, and that's just 90 degrees. And then it got a lifetime on some value between 3 and 5 steps. So they disappear pretty quickly, and they move pretty quickly. You can see the speed is 8 to 16, and then it has some gravity as well, so it will increase in speed, but and moving downwards, of course. That was the rain, for example, so it's pretty easy to set up. It takes a lot of space. You can see it takes this much just to create one particle type, but then you don't have to write it anytime again, and you can just call it. I made it a global variable, so every object can call it. Then I have these arrows, and that's what we use the sprites for. For example, the up arrow here, we just, instead of saying the shape, we set a sprite, and we set it to sprite part arrow, and set the parameters. We want it to be animated. If we want it animated, I could animate it. We can also set this force. It doesn't really matter because my arrows are not animated. We want it to stretch. No, we don't want that. And we want it to be start on a random image. And no, we don't want that either because there's only one image. So that's cool, and that's just how it works. Then we have we set its color, so it will be blended into that color. Here I've got yellow, and down here we got lime. And as you saw when I had the speed boost, the arrows was pointing the direction I was running. Unless I want to change the part type while using it, then I could just have had one sort particle, and we didn't have to have a direction. But because I do not want to do that, I just created two different kinds of particle. They are almost the same, except the arrow is pointing the other direction. So that's pretty easy as well. But that's how you can just add to the list of different kinds of particles all the particles you want. You can create your own sprites. You can do whatever you want with it. It's pretty easy to set up. If you need help with it, you can always go to the contents here and just search for particle, and you can see there is a whole list of different things here. One thing you need to be cautious about is the part type is where you create the particle type. Then there is also some particle create, for example, here, and that's not, you do not create a particle type. Then that's where you actually create the particles, as I will show you now in the player. First and foremost, I have created a begin step here where we merge our color towards being white, so that if it's colored in another color, it will slowly go back to its original color. And then in the health and power-ups here, you can see I changed the effects. There's one thing, because the way we do here, I haven't created a emitter, because we decide ourselves where we want the particles to be. And that's great, because we are a moving target. Instead of changing our emitter all the time, depending on what particle we create and stuff like that, we just place them ourselves. So what I do here is I, for example, the power of speed, I check for, I do it a lot more often than I did with the other one. I have set this to 2, so it gives a lot of arrows instead of just this one every second. Then I check for the direction I'm facing for this power up, because that's important depending on what particle you want to use. And then I just say particles create. I choose the system, set what position I want them in, and then I create a particle at that position of this type. And the same down here, you can see that the only thing it changes here is if I want them on my left, or created on my left moving towards the right, or on my right moving towards my left. The strength one, I just use image blend and then merge the color with a slightly higher value here, so it will colorize me faster than it decolorize me when I'm done. And then I just use red. Simple effect. It's not very cool because my sprite got highlights and stuff like that, but it's just one way to do it. A simple way to show this power up. I couldn't really come up with a cool particle effect that would make sense in the same way as the others. And then we got the power up jump, and instead it's the same as this up here, except we not change depending on the direction. So we just need one code here, creating one particle of the P arrow up yellow particle, and then we just place it at a random position from our x minus 16 towards our x plus 16. So in this 32 pixels, in one of these pixels, our particle created at our y position, because our y position is at our feet. So again, easy to do. When you have created the particles, you can just call them when you need them. So you can, if you want your enemies to be able to be boosted at will, you can just use the same particles once more, and that's pretty easy. And they do not fill as much as if you had to. They are random, so they are always changing, and you cannot, and they will not, take up too much space, because they only contain their speed and color and stuff like that, and that's it. There's nothing more in it. So that what makes particles very, very, very cool. And that's about all I have for you today. Remember, if you have any questions, write them in the comments and I will gladly answer them Now I've showed you in this tutorial how you can make a particle system, how you can make particles, how you can use an emitter, or how you can not use an emitter, how you can avoid using an emitter in some way, and what they are good for, the two different particle ways of creating particles, using emitter or not using emitter. So I hope this has covered everything for you. I saw no need to create more examples for you, and because it would just be doing the same once more. But it's a cool thing to use particles, make things more alive, and I like that. So I hope you have enjoyed. If you have, I would be very happy if you would rate the video. Write your comments what your opinions are on it, if you have any questions, as I said before. If you have any ideas for specific things you want to have in the tutorials, I write them down and I might pick them up and do them if it fits into this example, or I might save them for another example at another time. I have a specific question for you actually today, as in this new brain freeze. In this GameMaker Studio 1.3, in the newest version here, you can add spine animations. And I think I've asked this before if you want me to show how I animate them and stuff like that. And that's cool, but I was thinking if you wanted a tutorial how to implement them as well. It will be a spin-off of, it will not be in this series, but in a one video series, but where I show how you can import the sprites and how they work differently from other sprites, but how they can be, for example, more fluid, and how they can save animation, save space and memory, because they are made, you do not need to have every sprite, you can just have the body parts and then move them around in a given combination. But if you want me to make that video, write so in the comments, or on Twitter, or anywhere where I will see it. And I hope you enjoyed. I will not hold you here anymore. See you next time. Bye! Whoa! You seem to be at the end of the video. If you liked this video, or even if you didn't, it would make me incredibly happy if you would just rate it. Either way, I hope you enjoyed this video. Thanks for watching.